Welcome to the latest episode of the bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dad Zoom calls. Tonight's episode is on estate and financial planning, and we've got two experts, individuals that are part of the Special Fathers Network. Marianne Ehlert, whose organization is Protected Tomorrows, does more of financial planning than estate planning. And she's got a very interesting story, which I'm sure she'll share. Marianne is actually episode 157 of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, which hasn't been released yet, but it'll be released later this summer. And then we also have Brian Rubin of Rubin Law. And what's unique about Rubin Law is that their law practice, which has been around for 30 plus years, exclusively caters to families with special needs and disability. 100% of their they're one of a very small number of law practices here in the U.S. that cater to families with a disability exclusively. And Brian will talk about his involvement with the Special Needs Alliance. He's been the past president of that organization, which are like-minded attorneys that cater to the special needs and disability community. So the format for tonight's program is that I'll ask each of the presenters to make a brief self-introduction, 1 or 2 minutes, just so you can have a sense for what their background is. And then I'll ask that they come back and explain the type of work that they do. How do they get to be doing the work they do? What type of work they do? And, some basic advice that they might offer families, not just dads, but families as relates to the top 2 or 3 things that a young family or a family with kids that are maybe not so young anymore, but they might not have engaged financial planners or estate planners for that matter. Series of questions that I put together, and then if time provides, we'll open it up to the audience to ask some questions. So, Marianne, ladies first, the Zoom stage is yours.
Well, hi everybody. I am a mother, a sister, and a daughter of people with disabilities. And my background is financial. I started in this business, 50 years ago. In the financial arena, I hard to say that. But I was a mergers and acquisitions person. Brian's laughing because it is 50 years. But I've been doing special needs financial planning for 31 years. After working in the corporate world for many years, I decided to make a difference because of my sister, Marcia. She had cerebral palsy, and she taught me what's really important. So I started, and the funny thing is, when I sat down with my parents to find out what they'd done, I had found out my parents had disinherited my sister because that's the advice they got. So that's how I met Brian, because I got interviewed by the Daily Herald, and the story was about the importance of a special needs trust, but they used the headline of "Parents Disinherit Their Child." And so Brian calls me up and goes, "What did you say in that article?" So reading it, we found out that it was really right, but you know how papers are, they like to put bad headlines up. And so ever since then, that's how I learned a lot about special needs trusts, and the legal side of it is from Brian many, many years ago. But it's had a journey. So that whole learning about what my parents had done wrong and what they needed to do right. So I knew a lot of the regular financial planning, stocks and bonds and mutual funds, but in our financial business, we don't learn all the rest of this. There's sort of 2 paragraphs to become a certified financial planner on what a special needs trust is. So I have learned it over 30 years, worked with thousands and thousands of families. So we don't just do the financial planning piece for the parents. It's really about, we need a financial plan for you. You need a financial plan for your child. You need a life plan. So we feed that all together. So that's my journey. I have a son who is also disabled. He has mental illness, OCD, and he's also blind from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But the good thing is he is doing great, has his ups and down days, but all the conversations at the conference about, visual impairment and stuff just motivated him. It just happened to come on the perfect day. So that was really good. But I learned a lot from my dad. So I was really interested in your group, because why I do what I do is because my dad pulled me aside and said, "You know what, I'm going to write a letter to everybody I know about you and tell them that you can help them." And that's how my business started, with my dad just helping me. So I think he's gone from this earth, but he's still watching out. So,
Well, thank you for that brief self-introduction, Marianne. And I don't know if this would be the right time, but you're also an author. And I wanted to um, uh, remind the audience that there's a great resource. And the title of the book is The Gift I Was Given. And this is what it looks like. So we'll come back to that
okay.
because I think that's a very valuable resource. And Brian, why don't you make a brief self-introduction as well?
Okay, so actually, I'm same age as Marianne. We're both old. We're both within a few months of each other. Bottom line is life started out fairly normal. My undergraduate degree in accounting. Started out at a CPA firm. I said I can't do this the rest of my lifetime. I went back to law school at night. Wore a black hat. Worked for the IRS as an agent. Finished law school. I was an attorney for the IRS. First child was born. Everything was great. Second child was born. Something was wrong. My wife said something's wrong. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. Listen, we've been married 44 years. I didn't listen to her then. I didn't listen to her now. I was going through that first stage, denial. So it'll be fine. Then you go through the doctor hopping stage. We're going to find a doctor that has an answer. It's got to be a pill or a surgery or something. Okay. And you go through, you hear a doctor say delayed, and you say, oh, a dictionary delayed. It means you catch up eventually. Bottom line is you go through these steps. Younger fathers like Andrew can learn about special education, early intervention at age 3, going into the school system, IEPs, and all this. Bottom line is that thank God now there's a lot more opportunities and benefits than my son with autism was now 40 years old. It was a different story back then. But life took a fork in the road 40 years ago. And I left, I was in a small estate planning practice in downtown Chicago. And I had to be closer to home because I could not be 45 minutes, an hour away from the household because we were getting the calls constantly, things for Mitchell. So I moved the practice to the suburbs and was in a large firm doing estate planning, running the estate planning departments until he went on to Medicaid and I didn't need the group insurance. Then we opened up a boutique. Initially, we were in Marianne's suite, going back 21, 22 years ago. The practice was basically, became limited to just serving families with children with special needs. Part of that, a number of different groups. I've been on a lot of state commissions and things like that. I'm past president of the Arc of Illinois, things like that. But more relevant to the group for tonight is one of the organizations that I've been involved with for a dozen years. It's called Special Needs Alliance, and it's a national not-for-profit association of special needs planning attorneys. We now have attorneys in 47 states. And there's a vetting process. So it's not just pay your dues and your members, but you have to be in practice a certain number of years, concentrating, lecturing, basically the go-to people in different states on special needs planning. But what is special needs planning? And I'll talk more about that in a minute when you want me to start more substantive. The bottom line is, like Marianne was saying, it's not her business is not just selling investments. My business is not just selling documents. It's relationships, helping people navigate the maze, what makes sense, because what makes sense from a financial planning standpoint for a typical family is not what makes sense for us. And the documents in the road ahead for us from a legal standpoint is completely different. So when we have clients, we're walking them through the different steps. Navigating the school system, navigating government services, what government benefits are out there, how to qualify, how to stay qualified. So it's more than just documents. So with that, I'll finish by saying my baby, who's now 35, has been in practice with me now for 11 years. Actually, he's now president of the Rubin Law. I'm a president emeritus, them old. But he is president of SIBS, which is the state chapter of a national organization of adult siblings called Sibling Leadership Network. Sibling Leadership Network has chapters in about 30 some states, adult siblings of individuals with special needs. So get more information on that too. but they also run sib shops for Andrew, for younger siblings, that they're not alone. That if they have a sibling with special needs, they're not alone. When you're in the store, people are staring and saying what's going on or whatever, you're not alone, because they're living, as Marianne can attest to, it's a whole different world being a sibling of somebody with significant special needs. And I think historically, over the years, I've said they come out to be more sensitive, compassionate people. There's always exceptions to every rule, but in general, they go into the fields helping people. So with that, David, I'm going to stop and let you be the director here.
Well, thanks for that brief self-introduction, Brian, and a little background on yourself and your family. And the takeaway that I had about Rubin Law is that it's a family affair. You mentioned that your son, Benji, who graduated from Northwestern Law School, is also one of the attorneys in your firm. And I know that the whole family has been involved. So you really do offer a comprehensive perspective, not just from a dad's perspective, but a sibling's perspective with Benji, and your wife's perspective for that matter. So what I'd like to suggest is that you each talk about the work that you do. So Marianne, I'd like you to talk about Protected Tomorrows, maybe give a typical engagement, or maybe 2 separate engagements, just to give 2 points of reference. And then Brian, I'll ask you to do the same, to talk about, what it is that Rubin Law does, and maybe give a couple of different examples that listeners or viewers will be able to relate to. So Marianne, back to you.
Okay. Well, it's been a journey from starting. So when I started out, we thought we would be financial planners, right? And I remember going to my first financial planning meeting, and everybody said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to work in the field of working with families who have special needs in their family." And everybody kind of laughed at me and said, "Come on, you're never going to make it. There's never that many families." So here we are 31 years later, doing really well. And it just, we can relate. So this is what I've learned about financial planning, is it's not just about the money, and it's really not about the money at all. It's really about finding clarity. Finding some peace of mind, and finding the way, right? So the first thing I find is when families come in, sometimes they come in with some information, they think they're coming to a financial planner, and their shoulders are up, and we talk about what you want, what the future looks like, what's the best thing that can happen for you, what's the best thing that can happen for your child, what are your fears? And that's not an expected conversation with a financial advisor typically, but we are having that conversation about what really matters. But the other thing I know is that if you're not okay as the parent, your child's not okay. So we have to first focus on you and say, what's your life going to be like? What do you look like now? What's it going to look like later? What are your financial situation? And my goal was always, when I started out, to not only, some advisors say, I'm only going to handle people with $1 million. I'm only going to handle people with 200,000. I said, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to help every family who comes through our door. And our purpose is to help that family have a safe life, a fulfilling life, and for their child who has special needs to also have that safe and fulfilling life. So we built a process, and we said, we're going to take the family through a step process, because our lives, they're different, right? We're worried about, if I'm talking to somebody about rates of return and they have an IEP the afternoon, they're not listening to me. They're worried about what's really important. So for me to be the typical, you care about what your rate of return on your portfolio is, doesn't make any sense. And that conversation isn't held very often. We talk about it, but it's not the driving conversation. The driving conversation is making sure that what you want to happen with your lives happens, but you also feed those needs for your child into your plan. So we'll do the typical plan, but then we're going to come back and say, what do you want for the future of your child? You don't know. Your child could be 2, 22, 42, but I know you're dealing with a lot. So let's just start with one thing. Let's not try to solve the solutions. Let's identify what you need. And then we start to teach you about why your planning is different, because you have to know about benefits, government benefits, right? You have to know about, if somebody says you have to do some legal work, most people don't do it anyway. And all of a sudden you have to do a lot more legal work. So you've got to make sure you get to the right attorneys like Brian and do that legal work as well, special needs trusts and the things Brian's going to talk about. And then you've got to make sure that you're not only funding your life and into retirement funding more than just 2 people, but maybe 3. I have a single woman, her husband left, and she has 5 children with disabilities. So she's got to plan her retirement for 6 people, right? So we look at the whole family unit and say, how do we provide for that person? And then beyond you've got to provide for someone beyond you, because we have to understand what the government might do and how are you going to be able to do that, knowing that the government says your child can only have $2,000, but your child has to have a lot. So there's all these dynamics that we do in financial planning, and it's one step at a time. We want to accomplish one, and then we want to have success. And then we want to do number 2, and then we want success. So we tend to be, I have business partners on the money management side of my business, and they always say, wow, you are just, when they first met me and they learned what we were doing, they said, you have fee compression, which meant they thought that we did more work than we should for what we get paid. Now my partners come into the office and say, I think in your office, you have some special sauce. There must be some special sauce in there because your clients never leave, right? So I think it's about everybody in our office has either been a family member. We don't have just financial people. We have 2 social workers in our office. Who does that? But we have social workers. And so we want to understand the whole dynamic of your life. And that's what matters, right? So we're going to take that structure and then look at how do we make sure you're okay? It's really important. How do we make sure your child's okay? How do we make sure that all the legal work you do is funded to make sure it's appropriate? So it's hard for the average person to have enough for retirement. So how do we make sure that if you're going to not only have to fund yourselves, but ongoing beyond you, how do we make sure that occurs? And we use the typical tools. We have a money management firm. We can use the money management. Insurance plays a big part in people's lives because you have to make sure beyond you there's money left, right? What kind of insurance, all of those things come into play when you're planning. But those 8-step processes aren't all financial. Some of them are making sure that something happens to you. What does somebody have to know? And putting that in place. So that's what we're all about as a planner. But since we do know that we want to make sure that everybody's helped and that if somebody comes in with 50 cents and somebody comes in with 5 million, we want them to all walk away with a plan. So we created a parent university. We give classes once a month on Thursday nights, and we cover all different topics. Every year, this is our 3rd year of the university. Our classes are free. They're all recorded on our website. So sometimes we talk about government benefits. Sometimes it's talking about having attorneys or other professionals on to interview about what they do. This next one is going to be about corporate trustees and what does a corporate trustee do and should you use one? We're going to have one about this. What does schooling after age 18 look like? We're going to have all different topics. So we bring in guests and we talk about those topics, and it's an hour, and the hour goes by like that. But all the classes are recorded. So people who come on new, we have them come back. Last session, we had 800 people on. So it's growing every single time where we're getting more and more people. And I give homework. So I didn't think people would do the homework, but now they're sending it in. I'm trying to figure out how to score all that homework. But we love teaching. Somebody said to me this afternoon, I was talking to an advisor who came by my house, and he said, what do you sell? What kind of services? I said, you know what? I never sold anything. I'm just teach. And that's what an advisor does. If they can teach you and lead you and help you get to where you want to get, that's success. So most of our relationships with our clients are friends over time, and we're constantly looking. So I've worked on two typical cases. I have a client in Ohio, and the daughter was 38 years old with some disabilities. The mom had died. There was stepmom kicked in. Dad then died. And there were 11 step siblings, who didn't know what to do with this girl. And she was living in an apartment, a condo they had bought for her. And this is a very It's a company that owns a very big company, but nobody knew what to do. So they had her in this condo with cameras on her, and they took turns. The 11 siblings watched her in the camera to make sure she was okay. They did that because they had gotten her a job in a little coffee shop and she had been abused. So they didn't know what to do. So they put her in the condo. So I met all the siblings, interviewed all of them, tried to get a sense of the family. They had me in front of the family council to talk about what I learned. They said, she will never talk to you. But she reminded me of my sister a lot. So it was both emotional for me, but some therapy, I guess, too. But she came to the coffee shop to meet with me. I spent 2 hours with her. We're now really good friends. She emails me all the time. She's high enough functioning to communicate, but she never hardly left the condo except to go to this little coffee shop. She's now in a special needs college in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. She's in her 3rd year. We're looking for residential. She's probably going to get some kind of work that she can do. And she doesn't want to go back to Ohio. She found independence. She found safety. She found happiness. And so those are the stories. That's what we try to do. Was it all financial planning? Under that somewhat, but it's all about life planning and trying to find resources and trying to find schools and trying to find residential things and try to help people put residential deals together so they can find that. So we spend more of our time. I spend all of my time on that. I have people who, from my money management firm is doing the money management for me. I'm just spending the time with the family, trying to really figure out what's going to make people happy. And the best thing I've ever had somebody tell me is that we have 3 children. One is a doctor, one is an attorney, and one has special needs. And she's our most successful child. She's got a job. She's living with a roommate. She's really happy. And though the other 2 are really successful, she is our most successful child. So that's what we do. That's what I love to do. So.
Well, Marianne, thank you for that very insightful presentation. And if I can paraphrase what you've said, it's not so much about the planning, but the life planning. And my takeaway is that what you're really doing is putting the parents first, the child's needs right up there at the top as well, and trying to come up with a long-term plan through this deliberate process, this 8-step process that you had outlined. And it's really important not to just think about the components, but to think about the big picture. And I think of you as more of a quarterback, right? Somebody who's, sees the whole field, if you will, and can make sure that the game's going to go the way it's supposed to go, right? And obviously you cannot predict what's going to happen during a game, during the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, the fourth quarter of life, right? That's what we're talking about, not a 60-minute football game. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about the nuts and bolts of what you do as well. So Brian, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the process that you and your colleagues pursue
Basically,
from a legal perspective.
People come to us through the physicians, early intervention programs, schools, from all different sources. Our offices, like a lot of Special Needs Alliance members, our 2 intake people are my wife, mother, and another woman who's also the mother of a son with autism, who's now 22. Benji's a sibling. One of our other attorneys is also a sibling. So we can relate, so to speak. What we do is we tell people, look, we're going to have a consultation. Don't worry about it. We're going to block out a couple hours. And for the last year and a half, it's been by Zoom. But we're going to talk about what you need to know and give you a roadmap, so to speak. And depending on how old the child is, of course, it's going to be a little differently. But assuming the child is very, very young, and the jury's still out as to what their needs are going to be, what medical science is going to do in the future. There's a lot of unknowns, but we have to plan for the worst case scenario and then build in flexibility depending on how things go in the future. We need to build in flexibility. So we started talking about, okay, number 1, this is how the school system works, except for Michigan and Colorado, to age 22 is education. Go to those states, you go to 26. what they provide. We talk about early intervention programs, 0 to 3 programs by federal law. We'll talk about that, how to get into those programs. We'll even guide people in saying, this may be a better fit for you, this agency over here. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, there is Medicaid programs that don't look at parents. Yes, it's an income. This is what you need to qualify for. At 18, this is what the benefits are going to be. For that, when does the transition years and the IEP start, where the person will start talking about not taking the diploma at 18, but staying in the school until 22, and how those things work. So a lot of that, and we haven't talked about legal documents yet. This is all talking about navigating the maze and how this works, and telling people, look, we're not typical lawyers. I mean, I used to tell the kids when they were growing up, we're pretend lawyers, because people say thank you when they walk out of the office. We're not, the only people we argue with is the government, sometimes. Okay. So bottom line is that we talk to people about that. And then we say, okay, look, don't tell me that we're not worrying about this because you're only 25, 30, 35. It's not just what mom and dad might do that can, here's your first legal term of the night, mess up government benefits in the future, but it's what grandparents might do, or aunts or uncles, thinking they're doing the right thing, starting putting money away in 529 plans or setting up other funds. And we need to educate the extended family. So we talk about, number one, this is why you can't have money in their name. Okay, this is how you educate family. This is why we're setting up a special needs trust, freestanding, that other people can piggyback onto. We're going to give them the tools to piggyback onto. We're going to spoon feed them, give them fill in the blank forms so they can piggyback onto the special needs trust that you're doing. We're going to talk about the different types of special needs trusts, 2 main kinds, one for gifts and inheritances and one for first party money, maybe from a lawsuit settlement, a medical malpractice case, maybe from an inheritance that wasn't left correctly to a special needs trust. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to also talk about it saying, okay, now you got the special needs trust for the inheritance for this child or children, because as Marianne was alluding to, I have a lot of clients where there's more than one child with special needs. But now when mom and dad, and we also talk about estate tax planning, because a lot of these families would not worry about estate taxes, except they have a bunch of permanent life insurance inflating their estate because of the needs for this child, pushing them into concern about estate taxes. And now, while the federal exemptions were so high, pending in Washington right now is dropping the exemption from 11.7 down to 3.5 million. So a lot more people are going to be worrying about estate taxes. So we talk about that and we say, all right, look, now we're going to do a trust. And they say, and not like for the typical children, we say, if we pass away prematurely, somebody will watch their money until they're 25, 30, 35. Typical trust that a young married couple will do. But now we have to say, for the rest of this kid's lifetime, we need to provide. Okay, how much? Well, if we're planning for college education, good financial planners will put numbers in and come up with a projection based on inflation and return on investments. But now for this child, we're saying, wait, for the rest of their lifetime, what's inflation going to be? For the rest of their lifetime, what's going to return on investments? For the rest of their lifetime, what government benefits will exist? And of those, what will they be eligible for? We don't know what government benefits will exist a year from now, let alone 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. So it's more emotion than anything else. More importantly is in what manner do we leave things so there's a reserve fund. But if the child's older and we have a better handle on it, we can really zero in on how much money is going to be necessary. So example, my son, Mitchell, has been in a group home when he turned 22, though he's home at least one night a week. But I know what I'm contributing to the agency and what we're providing monthly, annually for him to be in a small residential setting and not a large campus setting. So I know what we're spending now. So I could say, when we pass away, 90 minus his age when the last parent passes away, times X number of dollars, today's dollars, with the cost of living increase on there, okay? That's going to be a safe amount. I don't want to overfund his trust because I don't want the other kids with their own kids saying, I really could use some of their money, but my brother dies, I can get to it. It's collecting dust. We're not making a dent in it. I want to have a reasonable amount in that special needs trust, not a ridiculous amount, but I want to have a good solid amount in there because I can't trust the government. Mitchell had a certain amount the state was paying, and a few years ago, overnight, they dropped it down by 22%. And if we wanted him to have the same small setting, we had to increase our contributions to the agency. That brings up the Special Needs Trust. For almost 20 years, I've been teaching courses in special and continuing education for attorneys on this. Anybody can do, most attorneys can do a special needs trust. It'll pass the test. It's a legitimate special needs trust. But there's a whole slew of bells and whistles that ought to be in there because of flexibility. Example, provision that allows contributions to agencies providing services or may provide services. It's because we want better services, or we want to get them into a certain place. Gifting to workers, especially during COVID, we've done a lot of gift cards to direct support workers. But those things can't be done unless the document says so, okay? Then you say, oh, hey, I'm a teacher maybe, and I have a public pension. A lot of the public pensions, military pension, police, fire, allow the annuity to go to the special needs trust, but they all have special provisions. They have to be in the trust, okay? Then you say, well, who's going to be in charge of this? Oh, grandma, but she's not going to be around when the kids are getting older. I could put a language in there when my other kids get to a certain age, they become trustees for their sibling, but the special needs child might outlive them. So if I trust my trustees, I could put in provisions that they can name additional people. Or, as Marianne talked about, we look at professional trustees. But when we look at professional trustees, they're not all created equal. Certain ones are no special needs trusts, and some of them are more concerned about the commissions and making money on it, and don't know special needs trusts. So the good special needs attorney is going to guide you, because even if you have a lot of people, the names of trustees, we have to have a backup plan just in case we need a professional trustee. Plus, we might want the individual people to engage them. We also may want the individual people to engage certain financial planners, and we can put preparatory language in there saying, this is who we would like you to go to. We also have to think about the parent's prayer. Let my child with special needs have a long, healthy, and enjoyable life, but let my wife or I live one moment longer. Because nobody's going to do for our kid, even if we have the best siblings in the world, it's not parents. So we have to plan. As hard as it is to think about that, we have to plan. So we talk about, okay, who's going to be guardians for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years? Maybe it's grandparents. Maybe it's the best thing. Maybe an aunt or uncle. But we have to think about that, and in our wills nominate who we would want to be guardians. Then we get to the age of turning 18, and all of a sudden we learn, oh, wait a second. My child's turning 18. They can't take care of themselves, but under the law, they're a competent adult until a judge says otherwise. So we talk about what are our options so that we can deal with schools and government benefits and insurance companies and everything else. And there's supported decision-making, there is powers of attorney, there's limited guardianship, there's plenary guardianship, there's different options, because no two kids are the same. And we don't have 2 or 3 sets of clothes on the rack and saying, all right, put this on. We have to tailor it, just like the school they're supposed to. We have the individual educational plan. We need to say what makes sense for this person. We want them to have, okay. And then we'll talk about trying to give them more independence. And we could talk about able counts and all these other tools that have come along in the last few years. But that's part of the portfolio of the special needs attorney. So the special needs attorney is not just doing a trust document. They're doing your entire estate plan. They're helping you fund the trust. They're educating you. They're working as part of the team with the financial planner and the CPA. It's a team. It's not just one person, okay? And they're holding your hand through this process. And Marianne alluded to it, but a lot of times clients come in and there's no way they're going to put together a reserve fund that to support this person. They have to look at some type of insurance. And that's why at that point, we want to get them in touch with somebody that it's not going to just sell them something and get a commission, but the right product that makes sense for them. And not always saying, all right, $1 million, $2 million. No, what can this person afford? And then look and see what type of products are available for that situation. So again, it's corny as it sounds. I know Marianne feels the same way. It's our mission. It's not just like a business. It's really a mission. And that's why I'm so comfortable in the Special Needs Alliance, because these members are, when we talk about it at conferences, everybody is there. We're doing our life's work, our life's calling type of a thing. And, Mitchell pushed me in this direction. I was doing estate planning, but, it became limited to this area. But there's a reason for things. So I just have to believe that. So I'm going to be quiet and turn it back to David and see what he wants us to do.
Brian, thank you for the buffet of different information and ideas. I think at some point, the average person's head would be spinning with all the things that need to be considered or given some attention to. So I think you did a nice job of just providing a new. And you're very humble about the type of work that you do. And what impressed me most when I first learned about your practice is that it's a flat fee type of basis. You're not charging on an hourly basis. So, I think that is a very equitable way to work with a family who has special needs, so that they will take advantage of the services and not think, oh, every time I talk to so-and-so, it's going to cost me X number of hundreds of dollars. So I really admire the work that you do, that you both do, that, it's about what's in the best interest. So you didn't use the word, either of you didn't use the word, but as a financial advisor myself, there's the concept of fiduciary, right? And that's what I think of you each as maybe not a formal fiduciary, but you're acting in what the best interest of your clients is. And there's an issue that I think is worth drawing a little attention to. You don't both need to address the question, but you can decide who wants to address the question. It's the importance of labels. Now, in most cases, some parents, maybe mostly dads, don't want their kids to be labeled, right? Because that somehow is going to limit them. And from a legal standpoint, right, from a funding standpoint, it's important that these issues are addressed and forthright. So I want one of you to address the issue of what the importance of labels is, so that you are entitled to the services that the government, whether they be state or federal services, can provide.
Start off by throwing a couple things out, and I'll turn it over to Maria. Just a couple of things. One is labels. I tell parents all the time, if it's to your advantage, if it's going to open up doors, you're using the labels. When autism the buzzword, would open up doors, even if it was undiagnosed developmental disability. If we can get a doctor to say autism was going to open up doors, okay, fine. When is it a problem? For lack of a better expression, a higher functioning individual, we don't want labels. This may close doors for them. It depends on, as I said before, no two situations are the same. We have to look at what makes sense for somebody. Right. But labels, if they're to the person's advantage, fine. But a sidebar to that, a lot of times we don't call it a special needs trust when we do a special needs trust. If it's a quote unquote higher functioning individual, it's the John Smith Trust. And it may be a special needs trust. We don't flag it. We don't throw it in their face every time the document is there. It says special needs trust on it. So we got to be sensitive to each situation is unique. That's why we spend so much time with the families, getting a feel for the families and where everybody's head is at. That's the reason I just hate the Zoom. I don't like, because I like to watch mom and dad sitting there and the body language between the two of them, reading them. And you learn a lot by watching people, which the technology is not as great, to watch that on Zoom. Right. But that's my feeling on it. Use it when necessary, but be sensitive to the fact that for some individuals, it's a downer. Okay.
Marianne, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I think the same way. I mean, it's individual. Sometimes people will come in and say, well, we want to say that our child is just learning disabled, when in fact they may could have a diagnosis. And if we go to Social Security with learning disabled, they're going to say, well, that's not a disability, that qualifies. So, but there's also times when we're talking to people about benefits and they bring their child to the office. So we're very careful about any discussion we have having to do with sensitivity and making sure, because our goal, remember, is to have the individual with disability have self-esteem. So that, and we also have discussions many times because the child says many times in our meetings, we don't even talk about death. And when we're talking about estate planning, we're talking about now and later. And so we've learned to use terms because we want safety, we want happiness, and we want to leave that child with self-esteem. But when you're getting benefits and you're talking to the government, you just have to know what you need to say and what you don't have to say.
And I want to say sometimes the hardest thing is when the parents are not on the same page. When you got one parent who's in complete denial, they're going to be fine, they're going to do this, and the other parent did. Sometimes I have the initial meeting and then I get the IEP and I get the MDC, the documentation, the doctor, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, they're talking about a completely different person that I'm reading about, from professionals. And we walk softly then, because we got to be sensitive to that, understand that as fellow parents, but we have to be basically say to them, hey, let's shoot for the stars. I mean, I'll tell you, to sidebar, Mitch forward in this pediatric psychologist, this pediatric neurologist's office, and he told us this kid's never do anything, put him in an institution. This is what people do, go on with their lives. 1940s, I'm talking about the 1980s. And Mitchell now it's unbelievable what he can do. With a job coach with him, he's working in the community several days a week. He's before COVID. Comes to our office once a week. It's a shredding and everything. He can read signs and does things all they told us we'd never be able to do. You push, but you got to plan for worst case scenario. And also, a lot of our kids are vulnerable. They might have abilities to do a lot of things, but they're vulnerable to be taken advantage of. So we need to protect them from themselves and other people.
So that's part of the planning process, because you want your child to be safe, but you also, we always hear the biggest fear is abuse, that something will happen. So when we're planning, we have to think about both of those. We have to say, what can we make sure that the best will happen? But what else do we have to do to make sure that the things that we're fearful of could be protections could be put in place? Yeah.
Point well made. So I've got just one more question or issue that I'd like to put on the table, and it has to do with something I think you were making reference to, Brian, is that it's not always the case that both mom and dad are in agreement or on the same page. It's usually one that gets to an understanding, a level of acceptance before the other does. So there needs to be some grace between the parents. But as professionals, I'm sure you see it all the time. And I'm wondering what advice you can offer to our viewers, the dads in particular, so that they err on the side of engaging, err on the side of being more protective than they might feel innately, right? Because I'll just speak from my own experience as just another guy. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And let's see how things transpire. And, that is at some level a form of denial, right? And what we need to do as professionals is help both parents, not just the dads, but both parents sort of along the path so that they're embracing the situation and being more intentional. And I'm wondering if there's any advice that you can each offer to the dads who are our viewers.
I'm going to defer to Marianne to start.
Okay. So we ask questions sometimes of both parents. So sometimes I'll say, do you think if they're coming in and their child's 18, do you think your child's going to drive? Dad's answer many times is yes. And mom's answer is, I don't know what you're smoking.
Yeah.
Right. So it's having that conversation of saying, okay, where are we now? And what do we want to happen? What will we have to do to make that happen? And sometimes it's that conversation to say, well, maybe he doesn't have what would be the downside of him driving? And so we have that conversation. And sometimes we get there, sometimes we don't. But it's a hard conversation when the parents don't agree. So I try to come up with questions. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll see if anybody needs a break. And usually one person wants a bathroom break. And I have separate conversations so I can kind of get a sense where people are at so I can guide and try to have the conversation come together.
I think that saying to them, once you hear them out, you read the people, as Marianne says, you're reading them, is saying to them, look, that's a great idea. It's great to hope for. Let's strive for that. But we just don't know. And if I get up to the point where we don't know, but it's a possibility, even though I don't think it is, it's a possibility, we have to plan for worst case scenario. And then build in flexibility. So special needs trusts have, when we do it, we put in termination clauses where we can cancel the special needs trust at a certain point if necessary. And so we got to build in the key word, as I always talk about in these situations, especially when the children with special needs is very young, is building in flexibility into the planning, because we don't know when our time is going to come, and we don't know what this future is going to hold. We need to build in flexibility and have trusted people involved. So we got players. Who are our players? You got financial people and personal needs people. Financial people are the trustees, executors, powers of attorney agents. Then you got the hands-on people. Where's this child going to be living? Medical decisions, school decisions. It could be the same people. Some people want to check and balance, just in case. But if you really trust these people, they can have both jobs. But a lot of times it's different part of the brain that you're looking for from these different people. Also, I'll just throw this out, especially for the younger fathers. People say to me, I would need to ask them if they would be guardian. No, you don't. Because number one, you know in your heart of hearts who's going to step up to the plate if they have to step up to the plate. They can't give you a straight answer at that point in time. What their situation is going to be, what they do. They really don't know what you're going through. Unless you're walking that walk, they really don't know 24/7, 365 what's going on in your head and what's going through. So you really basically are saying, I know who I think would step up to the plate. Also, people don't want to give you a straight answer. You're going through enough shit right now. I'm not going to say to you, I would never step into your shoes. So you're really not necessarily going to get a straight answer when you say to somebody, would you be guardian or would you do this or whatever? So my plea is, you know in your heart of hearts who's going to step up. Go with that more than trying to ask somebody.
My feedback on that is, and do it, because when I first started, they'd go see an attorney and then they'd go home and they'd have to think about the answers they were going to give.
Yeah.
And the attorney was asking them questions. Brian would ask them questions, who's going to be the future guardians? And they would just not know how to answer it. So going back to their heart, who do you think? Start there and go back and document it, because we never know what tomorrow holds, right?
Marianne knows what I use a lot of times is, okay, there's a gun to your head, boom, who is it? Give me a name. Yeah, 10 seconds. Now, give me an answer. And usually people are going to say, wow, yeah, that's the first person that I really thought of. Maybe it's it. You say, look, you got to make a decision now.
Yeah, we kind of do the same exercise where for money people and care people, we say, okay, who are the best people you know about money? Write them down. Okay, now circle the ones who would do a good job with taking care of your child. Put them in order, 1, 2, 3, let's go. Same thing on caregiving. Who are the first people coming in your mind? Let's write down all the names, pick the top 3, put them in order, because it's better than doing nothing. You can always change your will and change who the people are going to be. But
the problem is when the husband comes up with this list, the wife comes up with this list, and they don't match at all.
Yeah. But they have it. But we have a good conversation, right?
I have one. Just today, I was talking to her. Her husband passed away. He happened to be a partner in a very large law firm. He child with special needs, of course, and I said, you want to make changes? What do you want to change? She says, oh, the guardians and trustees. And I said, well, we just updated this about a year ago. Yeah, but I have all his brothers and sisters in there. I want to get them out.
Yeah. The one thing is that nothing stays the same, for sure. And so the other thing you have to know is when you put this down, sometimes we try to diagram things for people so that they can see what they did, and then they can look at it once a year and come across as, oh my gosh, I put that person as a money person. They just filed bankruptcy. I think we better change that. So things change, right? So the key is,
most common reason people call us to make changes is custodial guardians.
Right.
More than anything else.
Okay, well, I think that the main takeaway from that last part of the conversation is that be intentional, name the guardian, name the financial people, with the full understanding that those things are going to evolve. right? And it's more important that you just identify first group of people and that let's see how things evolve. And that's whether you have typical or atypical kids, right? It's no different when you're naming guardians. So I think it's a point very well made. So what I'd like to do is just say thank you to the two of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share some insights, appetizers, if you will, for the importance of estate and financial planning as it relates to families raising a child, or in some cases, children with special needs. This is the latest episode of the bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dad Zoom call on the topic of estate and financial planning. There's a whole series of other topics that we've addressed. They're all posted at the YouTube channel. So if you've made it this far, you're probably on the 21st Century Dads YouTube channel. And also scroll down underneath the video, and there will be a series of resources, some of which that we mentioned here in the conversation, and many others that we'll include, which I think that'll be a great resource to our families. So I'd like to thank you for listening to the latest program. And I will remind you that each of our presenters tonight has also done a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. So be sure, if you want to take a little bit deeper dive on their stories, that you can listen to their podcast and one of the 150 other podcasts from many of the individuals that are also included in the Special Fathers Network. So that's all for now. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at one of the other bi-weekly days.